February's Unified Police Department Board meeting. Councilmember Trustee David Brems, our chair, is on his way here, and I know the snow's been a challenge for a number of people this morning, so I feel sorry for the folks. I talked to Lieutenant Lovato about his struggle to get past some deer on I-15, coming up from 120th or so south. So, and then so David will be here in a minute, and then the record should reflect that Carolyn Kigley is attending this meeting remotely, because I'm sure the roads coming down from Brighton are a fright too. So anyway, we have a quorum. Would you call the roll, please, and we'll confirm that.
Director Brems, Director Cardenas.
Here.
Director Dolly. Director Gettle.
Here.
Director Kigley.
Here.
Director McCalman. Director Peterson. Director Prokopis.
Here.
Director Silvestrini.
Here. Okay, welcome everybody. Before we get started, Chief Mazarin, could you please come forward? So, so on behalf of the board here, and I think I can say on behalf of the entire department, I'd like to congratulate you on 30 years of service to either the Sheriff's Department or the Unified Police Department. And I'd like to present you with a certificate of recognition. And you can thank your folks for this, right? But anyway, in appreciation of your 30 years of service and dedication to the UPD and the decisions that you serve, that's a great accomplishment, and you're not going to be allowed to retire.
Okay. Been a wild ride.
Has been a wild ride, and especially the last couple of years, but you've navigated it with aplomb, I will say, right? Okay. So do we have anybody that would like to make public comment to the board? I don't see anybody, but I would like to say something. On January 26th, we had an episode here in Mill Creek, an interface between officers of our Mill Creek precinct at UPD and the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Police, basically. And I just want to congratulate Sergeant Kevin Takano, Officer Chris Schroeder, and Officer Crystal Grady for their work on this matter. I know that our department, you guys have to work with federal agencies, and having trust among agencies when you're working together is of utmost importance. It's like any kind of situation where you're part of a team, you have to be able to trust the people you're working with. And it would have been really easy for our officers in this situation to have just accepted what they were told and not question it. And if they had done that, I think that some injustice would have been imposed upon an American citizen who I think was detained because of his bad language rather than his necessarily bad conduct, which is borne out by the conflicting statements that ICE officers made to our officers, as well as video evidence that kind of contradicted what had been reported to them. So that takes some courage. It's a lot easier just to go with the flow and accept commands from a federal agency, which might deem to be superior. I don't know how that dynamic works, but I want to give them credit for doing the right thing in this situation. And then not only handling the situation appropriately at the scene, but also because their antenna were up with respect to the conflicting stories, going further and investigating the situation and getting some video evidence which actually confirmed that what they were being told probably was not correct. So they're to be congratulated. I'm really proud of our officers for the way they handled that. And I'll just say, I sent an email to ICE, as you may know, and I did that with some trepidation. It's kind of a situation where, especially in the current environment, I have no intention of interfering with their work and doing what they need to do. But I do, as I said, draw the line at them harassing American citizens or profiling people, and I think there was maybe some of that here. But I did that in part because I wanted to give support to the officers in the department who performed admirably in this situation. So I commend them and thank them for what they did. So.
Mayor, could I just echo that as well? And also, I wanted to say that we in Midvale appreciated the statement that you released as well. That provided a lot of comfort to folks in Midvale who were and still are quite nervous and anxious about what's happening out there. And I did want to extend the same appreciation for UPD for the statement that you guys released and saying the evidence that showed that there were some different things happening than was first reported. So we appreciate that in Midvale as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other public comment? Okay, then let's move on then. We get to do some more welcoming. So Chief Mazarin and Harry, do you want to do the honors?
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 3, we want to welcome our new Copperton representative. My understanding was that was ratified by the Copperton Community Council last night, if I'm correct, or Copperton City Council. So we'd like to welcome Linda McCollum to our UPD board, and we're very eager to meet with you soon and working with you in the future. And appreciate your representation of Copperton's great community. We don't have the document yet from the council, but we'll get that and make sure that's formalized. I also want to thank Mayor Clayton for his being Johnny on the spot and stepping in to fill that role for a couple of months while that transition occurred. So that's all I have on that.
Thank you. So Linda, on behalf of the board, welcome. And I'm glad you were able to find your way here in the snowstorm this morning. And okay. All right, then let's go on to Harry with committee assignments.
Thank you,
I'm going to take over, by the way.
Mayor. The purpose of this is to
All right.
obviously give our representative from Copperton an opportunity to serve on the various standing committees we have. And so I wanted to just bring that up so that she can take assignments. And we are now fully staffed in our committees at this point. So the 3 standing committees are Budget and Finance, which of course deals with the budget, a big issue this time of year. We have Benefits and Compensation, also a very timely committee assignment, and Governance, which is something that has been a little inactive, but deals with the structure of the UPD. We spent a lot of time on those issues as we reformed the amended and restated interlocal agreement. But there are always issues that may come up, and so I just want to welcome you as well and just ask the board to assign committee or committees to our new board member, and then we can get those committees going.
I'm going to yield the chair to our real chair, and the imposter's been exposed. So David, take it over.
Thank you for helping me out this morning, Mayor Silvestrini. Do we need any action on this?
I think just a motion to approve whatever committee assignment or assignments, and then that would be it.
We have new members, and I think we talked about adding members to these committees. Is there some discussion about that?
I'm willing to stay on all the committees that I'm on. So it's a voluntary thing. And Linda, if you have any interest in stuff.
Am I picking a committee? I pick benefits.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you can.
Can I?
So we'd like to add Linda McCallum, say that correctly, to Benefits and Compensation Committee. Any others? We have a motion to approve these committees.
Oh, move.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Hey.
Thank you. Legislative update, Heather. Line.
Hi, thank you all for letting me join from the Capitol. I've been here since about 7 a.m. and it's just very challenging to get away during the session. So I really appreciate you letting me attend via Zoom. That said, we've got a few minutes before I need to pop off to have some meetings with some lawmakers. But I just wanted to let you all know that UPD is very highly respected up here. I really appreciate Chief Maz and Harmony. They receive constant emails from me and text messages asking their opinions on bills, and they are giving me feedback. And so are all the different precinct chiefs, and Harry's been instrumental in that as well. So I just want to let you all know that you have an incredible team that is paying attention to what's going on up here, and I really appreciate that and their expertise and the law enforcement officers who come up and testify on our UPD bills and just other bills that really matter. So you are being represented well by your agency and the officers that serve in it. So thank you for that. So we are monitoring about 100 law enforcement related bills so far this year. We're actively working on a couple dozen of those, but the rest we're just kind of making sure we know what happens. I picked a handful of bills for us to go over, but at any point, please stop me, ask questions. When we get to the end, if I didn't cover a bill that you're interested in, feel free to ask me. If you want to talk offline, I'm available pretty much anytime, day or night. Harmony has all of my contact information, so please reach out during the session and after the session is over as well. So that said, you have probably heard a lot about House Bill 267. That is the labor union bill. It's kind of been all over the news, and I know a lot of our first responders and teachers are very, very concerned about it. The first substitute version of that bill did pass into law, and the governor did sign that on the 14th. So that is the law. It does a number of things, and I'll just briefly go over a few of them. If I grab the right report. So the first thing it does is it prohibits public sector collective bargaining. UPD doesn't utilize collective bargaining, so that won't have an impact. It does not affect the ability for labor union representatives to meet with participating employers to discuss issues. So the labor union reps can still speak with you and with Maz and others. Let's see, it does prohibit release time to perform union duties. So they are not allowed to perform their union duties while they're on the clock for UPD under this bill. And there is a provision that states that public property may be utilized by unions to meet if it's also open to the regular public on the same basis. If you charge a fee for the regular public, you have to charge it for the labor union. That said, we did get an amendment in last year that Representative Swisher kept this year, that if the participating employer gives permission for the labor union to meet on your public property on a case-by-case basis, so every single time they'll have to give permission, you don't have to charge that fee or necessarily open it up to the general public, which I think is very important for law enforcement. You don't necessarily want to open up every area of your precinct for meetings of the general public. You will need to have a written policy in order to do that. So this bill takes effect May 7th. So between now and May 7th, you may want to consider creating a written policy and adopting that. Any questions on that bill?
I just wanted to. We have the bills effective July 1, 2025, and UPD is already looking at what I would call maximum involvement with our association without violating the provisions of the law. So as we move forward, the effective date of July 1, what we can do, what we can't do going forward. One of the things we looked at was that instead of allowing meetings on the third floor, which is not open to the public, we do the second or some other floor. So things like that are minor accommodations that comply with law without making it difficult for our association. Probably the biggest thing we're going to be dealing with is the question that cannot pay them or use public funds to compensate them for the activities. That is going to be a change in our policies to deal with, but I think other than those two, it seems like we still interact with our association ways we have to pass without
So I don't know that I speak for other board members, but on my own account, this board and this department, I have always had a really good relationship with labor and the labor group. And it isn't a collective bargaining arrangement, and I don't think there's ever been any exclusion of other voices other than the labor group's voice. In fact, I know that that's not the case because we at one point had like 2 competing labor groups. But I'll just say that I want to assure our rank and file officers that we want to continue to listen to them in whatever form we have to do that. And it's easier to do that through a representative group. And it isn't collective bargaining to do that, but I want everybody to know that I still support our officers and their organization. I think it's actually easier to talk to a representative group like that sometimes than to meet with 200 or 300 people and try to sort through what they might want. So we have to observe the law. I can tell you that our city will make space available whenever we can in accordance with the law for them to meet. So.
Go ahead, Heather.
Okay, perfect. Just an example of some legislation where we saw it, there were some concerns raised. Your chiefs got back to me, let me know what the concerns were. We met with the sponsor and were able to amend a bill to take us completely out of it. And one example of that would be Senate Bill 57, which
If I
is,
could, Heather, just a
Yeah.
second, it's hard to hear you. We're going to see if we can
Oh.
turn it up without screeching reaction to it.
okay.
My mic is off.
All right, is that sounding better? Okay, perfect. So one example of a bill that we were able to quickly fix, so where we went from having some concern to now we're just monitoring it to make sure it doesn't change, would be something like Senate Bill 57. It's newborn relinquish amendments. A few years ago, the legislature passed newborn relinquish laws that stated that a newborn that is within 30 days of being birthed could be dropped off at a hospital with an emergency department that was open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with no questions asked. This bill was trying to expand that and say that it could be dropped off at any police precinct, any firehouse, and also any hospital, as long as they were open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That posed to be a little problematic because what does that mean, open? Most precincts are open and they may have employees coming and going, but they're not necessarily staffing the front door. They couldn't easily see that a newborn was being dropped off. So we presented those concerns to the sponsor, and he actually just deleted everything about law enforcement and fire stations. But they did change the bill to make it so a newborn can be relinquished up to 90 days post-birth, no questions asked. There's multiple grandma bills that you're all going to want to be aware of. I'm highlighting 2 just today, but I can highlight more during the March board meeting. One of them is House Bill 222, and that is access to traffic accident reports. The way this bill was originally written, an attorney could have a grandma request filed with a law enforcement agency for all of the records dealing with the traffic accident, including body camera footage and things like that, even protected records. However, if that attorney were to receive those protected records, it now falls on them to protect them under grandma. They're not allowed to send those out to the media or anything else. But the problem with this bill is that it removed, or it placed, a $100 cap. So law enforcement agencies could only charge $100 to fulfill these records requests, which sometimes are in the thousands of dollars of real-time costs associated. So we were able to work with the sponsor and remove that $100 cap, which makes the bill infinitely better. So now law enforcement agencies may charge the real cost of providing all of that information. Let's see, another one is Senate Bill 163, Government Records Amendments. This passed out of committee on the 14th, and it's on the second reading calendar in the Senate. This is one of Senator Harper's bills. So among other things, this bill is going to require an annual review of an entity's record retention requirements and its compliance with those requirements. And it makes it a crime to destroy a record with the intent to avoid disclosing the record in response to a pending records request. So that'd be a Class B misdemeanor. So if you get a records request, you start going through your records and you think, oh, I don't want to have to give this up. Please don't destroy it after this bill takes effect. It is a Class B misdemeanor. And then here's the thing that will go to all of your entities, whether the municipalities that you serve within or Unified Police Department. A summary of government records requirements must be created and provided to all employees of your government entities every single year. And there needs to be an internal training component of that. So the records retention schedule that they must keep. So this is for, right now, it's for anyone within any governmental entity. I've been working with Senator Harper discussing that the individuals who don't actually create records, they probably don't need training on how to keep and maintain them. So if you have janitorial staff, those working on landscaping or just other areas where they don't do administrative work, they're not creating any form of a record, they probably don't need to have this annual training every single year. So he is open to that amendment. I'm going to be providing him language later this afternoon, kind of narrowly tailors it. When speaking with him, he does want this to apply to all law enforcement officers because they are creating records. He wants them to know what the records retention schedule is for anyone who creates or has those types of records. So currently, it's going to be most of your records managers that are completing an annual training that is required by law. This is going to make you have to do an internal one. Again, with speaking with the sponsor, it can be something very minimal in that you create a one-page handout, you give it to them, you just tell them this is what you have to do. Maybe they sign a paper to say they've received the training and you are good to go. So you get to create that training and make it as long and short as you want, but you will have to have that one-page handout. Okay, any questions on that one? All right, so for the sake of time, just going to quickly go through a couple of others. Senate Bill 245, newborn child insurance notifications. This is one just, again, we need to pay attention to. If there is a newborn child, an adoption, a marriage where a child comes into one of your employees' families, they only have 30 days to get that child on their insurance policies for health insurance. This bill is going to make it clear that if your employee requests maternity leave or paternity leave or FMLA leave because of a new child, you have to give them notification and all of the information they need to know how to sign that child up for health insurance and that they have those 30 days. And then Senate Bill 255, it is the line of death duty benefits. That's actually in committee this morning, probably being heard right about now. And if there is a line of death within the agency, it will make it so that UPD, the employer, will pay the health and dental and vision care for the surviving spouse and children. So that's just something to be aware of. That could be an added expense, but a necessary one. Let's see. We have a number of bills that UPD is actually proposing. Senate Bill 81, that was brought to us by our SVU detectives, and it is care provider modifications. We've been working closely with the AG's office to get this bill through. It's passed out of the House and Senate committees. It's currently on the House second reading calendar, so it looks really good to make it through into law. What this does is it kind of closes a loophole in the law where if there is a consensual, intimate relationship between a caretaker and a vulnerable adult, that just makes it illegal. If the caretaker wants to enter into that type of relationship, they need to stop being their caretaker and just choose to be in a relationship. And this is just designed to protect those vulnerable adults. Chief Hoyle brought a couple of bills, House Bill 305, cohabitant definition amendments. This bill may go into interim. We're going to see if we can get it through this year, but it's possible it'll be an interim committee study. And this again just kind of closes a loophole. What they're seeing is They're siblings who live in the same household of various ages. So you may have a 14-year-old living with their 24-year-old sibling, and an assault occurs where the 14-year-old is beaten by the 24-year-old. Law enforcement officers show up. They can only charge assault at the moment, which basically means they'll go to booking, get released, and go right back home to the child that they've just abused. So this amendment would change to make it so they could actually charge that 24-year-old with domestic violence, which would create the protective order and do a threat assessment and hopefully protect that child. House Bill 225, school zone amendments. Again, this one was brought by Chief Hoyle. And what it does is, a few years ago, a law passed that allowed a judge to issue compensatory service instead of paying a traffic violation for individuals who sped through school zones if they were going 10 miles per hour above the speed limit. There have been some problems in some municipalities where the crossing guards just don't feel safe having individuals show up, be there for 45 minutes. They're not happy to be there. They're bugging the crossing guard to sign off to say, I've done this compensatory service, and it's causing some of our law enforcement officers to have to leave what they're doing on the road and go and actually sit with these individuals so that the crossing guards aren't having to deal with it. So this change just removes that compensatory service option unless they're going 40 miles per hour in that school zone. So it bumps it up to a 20 mile per hour issue. They'll still get a ticket. They'll still have to pay the fine. You still can't speed through a school zone, but you won't have to do that compensatory service unless it's 40 miles per hour or above. And that's for a first offense. If they're a repeated offender, if they have a second offense, a third offense, a fourth offense, it drops back down to that 30 miles per hour over for the compensatory service. And it has been a valuable tool. A lot of individuals have said, I didn't realize how dangerous it was and how hard it is to see kids. So there's a purpose for it, but we're just going to help keep our crossing guards a little more safe. The city of Kearns actually brought up House Bill 407, which is a mini motorcycle bill. And basically, it's going to allow law enforcement officers to issue citations for teenagers and kids that are driving those mini motorized vehicles on public roads. They can issue a fine with the citation. They can impound the vehicle. If the child is under 16 and doesn't have a driver's license, they're not allowed on the road under this bill. And it can make them have to wait a year before they get their learner's permit or driver's license. So there are some penalties associated. Initially, the bill stated that if there were 2 citations or more, the parent could actually be issued a Class C misdemeanor. And the committee did not like penalizing the parents in that way. So that was removed in a substitute, and it passed out of committee, and it's moving along. And the last of the UPD bills, this is an interim committee bill that we worked on. It's House Bill 38. It does a lot of things dealing with law enforcement, prostitution, things like that. But what we care about and the portions that we were working on is that it creates some enhancements for gang offenses, and it adds an offense for bringing a minor into a gang. So that's going to close some of those loopholes where we have adults that are trying to get these kids under 18 to join gangs, and then they go out and commit the crime because they know those minors, they're just not going to get in that much trouble. So the adults are keeping their hands off of it, but bringing kids in, this is going to make it so we can go after those adults and hopefully fight some of the gang issues that we're having in our state. I have a few more bills on the list, but we've been chatting for quite some time. So do you have any questions on these bills or any other legislation? I can't hear anything if anyone's talking.
Thank you, Heather, for your excellent work tracking all these bills, keeping us informed, helping us understand, and nudging the legislation in favorable ways. We really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I'll be giving an update during the March meeting. So if there's any bills you specifically want to hear about in the March meeting, or even bills that you want a report written about, I'm going to create a legislative summary review of bills that I think it's important for all of us to be aware of, and probably highlight 5 or 6 of them in that oral discussion. But if there's bills that you're interested in, whether it impacts your municipality or UPD, please let me know, and I'll make sure to include that for March 20th.
Yeah, thank you for asking us. We would appreciate a presentation knowing how all this legislation ends up.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, one more thing. Senate Bill 133, it deals with metal theft. That was a great concern. We strongly oppose it. It deals with catalytic converters. Outside of being a pawn shop or someone who purchases metal, most people do not like it. It did pass out of committee. It has been circled on the third reading calendar for about 2 weeks now, and I think that's a good place for it to stay. So just quick update on that in case your municipalities were concerned about the catalytic converter bill.
Thank
Okay.
you, Heather.
Thank you all so much.
Chief Mazarin, UPD update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quick, I want to thank Heather. She does a phenomenal job up there. And I also want to thank our members who went up and testified in committee. They've been very, very effective up there when they go and they inject their real experience and real world knowledge into that legislative process. They're extremely effective. So I'm just really grateful they're so willing to go up there and do that. It's not always easy. Just a couple other quick things. I want to highlight some of the great work that's being done right now. One, Harry just mentioned me. I know there's going to be a story on KSL. I think, is that tonight, Amy? Story on KSL tonight about our SVU unit, our Special Victims Unit. They've been working with the media on a story, real positive, highlight of the great work that they do. That is a hard job, very difficult subject matter to deal with. And it does take a toll on our detectives, but it's so important that they help those victims. So that'll be a great story that'll be on KSL. So you can watch for that and see the great work that they're doing in your communities. Along with that, our Violent Crimes Unit recently solved a cold case that occurred, a homicide that occurred in July 10th of 2016. And they were able to solve that here just recently in the past couple of weeks and get charges and book that suspect in jail. So they had to tenaciously work that case for years, and so we're really grateful to them. And I know the family and the family of the victims are very grateful to the detectives, and especially Detective Jeff Clark and how he handled that. So great work by them. And then another case I want to highlight real quick. I'm going to pass this picture around. Everybody loves dogs, right? If you want to just pass it around, take a look at that. Great work by our directed enforcement units. And this is, again, is just a simple case of heads up ball by detectives that are out working the streets. They see a simple traffic violation, something feels weird. They make a stop for the traffic violation, and very shortly into that contact, they can tell something's wrong. And so, with their experience and their training, they start to ask the right questions, and then our canine friend shows up on scene and the jig is up. And that simple traffic stop resulted in 164 grams of heroin seized, 27 grams of cocaine, and 15 grams of crack that were seized, 25,000 in drug proceeds seized. And then the real significant part, if you look in that picture, you can see those bags with the blue pills. Those are fentanyl pills. It was 4 pounds of fentanyl. That's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pills. And just that stop alone, if you think about what that means, is those pills, no borders or bounds, they flood into all of your communities, and it only takes one of those pills to cause a death or an overdose. And with that one action, they were able to seize and intercept that amount of drugs. I mean, 4 pounds of fentanyl is a really good arrest. So it just, again, it highlights the great, all of it. Yeah, he's a good boy. He did a great job, indicated on the car, and they knew at that point the deal was done. So again, very solid by the book police work that resulted in outstanding results. But yeah, 4 pounds of fentanyl is no joke. It's a very dangerous drug, and you can see the havoc it's wreaked on our community and state and country. So again, real good example of classic police work that's being done in your communities every day by your police department. And And we got really good people doing good work. I guess the last thing we'll talk a little bit later today about finance and the budget and some things. We're working very hard on that. And we'll get more into this when we hear from Carolyn, who's over the finance committee, and Debbie, who's working hard on the budget. And I want to thank Debbie. She's been under the weather, pretty sick, and she has really soldiered on and worked hard because, you know, it couldn't be a worse time for her to be sick, but she's worked really hard to get the budget prepared as early as possible. I mean, we're in February, we're already plugging in as many numbers as we can. And you remember maybe in years past, I mean, we were doing this in April and later in the year. So we're trying to get this to you as early as possible, get you the best information we can. I want to remind you as we talk about the budget, we're early in the schedule, you know, by our own policy and practice. And so we're just giving you information for a starting point to get your input into that, create a budget that's workable and does what we need to do to provide those law enforcement services in your community and move forward in a good direction. So we look forward to your direction on that. Any questions for me?
Chief, I just wanted to say thank you again for, we had a workshop, as you're aware. We had some community members who were pretty nervous about ICE activities, and Chief Morse and Chief Mazarin were nice enough to answer questions from our council and community members. And I think that did a lot to reassure our public that that we're doing everything we can to keep them safe in the community. So thank you again for being at that workshop.
Thank you. It's our pleasure. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Thank you. It was not, and I don't want to speculate, but it most likely was somebody part of an organized drug, but it was, yeah, it was somebody that had actually been deported, you know, a couple times and come back in illegal reentry, but it was a significant volume of dangerous drugs. So they did a great job. Anything else? Thank you.
Okay, Chief, while you're up there, approval of surplus resolution. Oh, acceptance of donations, and we can do both of those.
Okay. So in your packet, you'll see a donation from Wes Rethwill for some GPS tracking units for $2,134. We'll submit that to you. And then I don't know if you want to go through that motion now, or do you want to?
I'll make a motion to approve the acceptance of the donation.
Second that.
Motion is second on acceptance of donations. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. Approval of surplus resolution.
Again, in your packet, you'll see that we're surplusing a number of vehicles, 15 again, to keep the fleet healthy and sending those to auction.
Motion to approve the disposition of surplus property.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if
Carolyn,
I could-
can you hear me?
Mr. Chair, if I could update the board on one matter, I have now received in my inbox live update that we have received the resolution from the Copperton Council appointing a new member. So we're official as we can be.
Thank you. And thank you for agreeing to do this. Okay, Carolyn.
Yes, yeah, I can hear you. So, with Debbie being sick, I'm so glad that she handed out at our financial committee, she handed out a hard copy and emailed it to all of you of all that she had presented at the financial committee, kind of a summary. And so I can summarize that unless Debbie wants to summarize that, depending on her voice or her coughing or whatever. But basically, we covered the budget process update, and then we discussed the PMI and also the COLA. Chief Mark Olson presented the insurance adjustments. So I'll leave it up to Debbie and Mark to bring to the board on those subjects, what you want to talk to about today. Because there was going to be some updates on that anyway this week.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and Board. I did send out that memo. Hopefully you had a chance to review it. The memo that we sent to the Finance Committee. Basically, we're in our first year as the reorganized UPD of Greater Salt Lake. We have settled into various locations. Thank you all for graciously giving us a home to stay in for this year. We have had a few challenges. As some of you know, we've had some communications issues and trying to make sure that everybody has a place to fit in. We're also, one of the biggest things we've been looking at this year is the trying to find a building for especially like special ops or some of the departments within the organization. We've also had some staffing challenges, with some of our, a lot of our officers having to leave or retiring. So we want to thank the board for approving that incentive bonus to help out with our recruitment. I think Mark can tell you that we may not be fully staffed, but we are fully encumbered, meaning that all of our positions now at least have or will have a body coming to it. So that was helpful. Right now, what I want to do is move forward with presenting the preliminary budget. Angie, if you could bring that up or share that up. Excuse me. First, I want to start out with covering the changes or possible changes in the organization. We have, in this budget, we do have sworn positions that have increased by 4. We have 1 in professional services training and 3 that will possibly go into Kearns as soon as I meet with the chief again to see what the status on that is. That is included in the budget as of right now. The civilian positions remain the same, but we've had some changes within that. We are converting 1 civilian position from special operations to an officer position, in which I just mentioned in the professional services training. And that's due to the civilian retiring and moving, this move that we are anticipating going into the new building. So that position can be combined or absorbed. And so we'll just convert that to an officer position that's desperately needed in the training department. This also includes the new licensed clinical social worker position that's being shared between Mill Creek and Holiday. So with that licensed clinical position being added, but the removal or converting of the civilian position to an officer, the civilian positions remain the same. If you can go to the next screen. Thank you, Angie. So what is included and what is not included in this budget? Right now, the revenues are flat. We'll keep monitoring those and looking at those as time goes on, but right now they are flat. We do not know yet if there will be an increase or any change in the VEC rates. We have heard that possibly there will not be an increase, but we'll be monitoring those changes for that as well. Health insurance is up 8.3%. Excuse me. That is shared with the employees at an 80-20 split. So UPD's share of that increase is $370,000. That's the impact to this year's budget. The URS rates remained flat for sworn positions, but they decreased 1% for the civilian positions. That was a savings of $59,000. Wages and benefits are based on actual amounts, not averages, and we did include a 5% cost of living increase that can also be looked at. This budget is based on the 70-20-10 shared service formula, 70% cases, 20% property valuation, and 10% population. We will be requesting updated numbers for the number of cases, the property valuations, and population estimates for each member. So consequently, those rates may change for each of the members once the new information comes in. Okay. The budget, as of now, this is where the budget stands. The total budget right now is 68.22 million. For the city's shares, that's 40.13 million, which is 58.82% of the budget. Slovisa's share is 28.09 million. It should have million on there, for 41.18% of the budget. The overall increase this year is 4.47 million. For the rate, the overall increase is 7.1%. Mill Creek's is 7.84%, Holidays is 5.15%, Midvale's is 6.17%, Kearns is 9.93%, Magna is 5.70%, White City is 7.85%, Copperton is 10.93%, Immigration is 5.14%, Brighton is 3.15%. For Slovisa's overall, it would be 7.49%. You can move to the next screen, Angie. Here's the breakdown by city. For the precinct operating expenses, the shared service expenses, and then each one of the members' assessments. So that look at the bottom line, it shows what the dollar difference is, and then also what your percent increase is per member, and then the overall is 7.01% right now, as it stands right now. Moving to the next screen, Angie. This is Slovisa's members breakouts right there. Again, you can see the bottom line. The bottom two lines will show you what the dollar difference is, and then what the percent increase is for each member. For Slovisa, overall total of 7.49%. And then on the final screen, Angie, we did have a request for the history of increases over, the request was for 5 years, but when I went back to the 5th year, the numbers, the percentages were getting skewed because we had Taylorsville. In this one, I tried to keep it for our current members only, which meant that in 22 and 23, I had to eliminate the county and the Southeast and the Southwest Islands. So this is just to get for our current members. And you can see on the total, in fiscal year 22-23, the increase was 13.24%. And that's because that was the year of the wage wars. The following year, there wasn't a lot of drama, so it went to 3.81. Last year, we had the separation, and so the increase was 5.23%. We were tasked to stay at 7, and we were able to come in at 5.23. This year, right now, we are sitting at 7.01%. That's not yet, the PBIM has not yet been given, so it's not been determined. We still have some work to do on the budget. And then there's Slovisa's 4-year history there as well. And so with that completes what our preliminary budget is. As Maz mentioned earlier, we are looking for some guidance from the board as to what you want the PBIM, what your max PBIM you feel could be. Thank you. You have any questions?
Can you go back to the slide that breaks down the various increases? I'm just trying to make sense of the math. If we're looking at and my thought is when we're looking at a 5% overall COLA market, I'm trying to figure out how we get to 7%, I guess, is the bottom line.
Well, so the COLA is 5%.
Well, but the COLA and markets is not, that's going to just be an increase to the wage and benefits line items, right?
Correct.
Which
Yes.
is not going to be 5% overall.
No, it's not. We looked at where so we had the 5% in the wages, and then we also had an 8.3% increase in the insurance. And that, so that plays into the additional increases in the budget. We did have some operational increases and some capital increases because we're not sure what's going to be needed once we move into the new building.
Okay, so it would be, because if I'm just doing my Murray High School math, I would say I would count on about 4% in the wage and market line item, and about 0.5% for medical. Well, for health insurance, I'm sorry, health insurance, and then the URS is pretty flat, and VEC's pretty flat. So that's 4.6, 4.7%. So what you're basically saying is we can anticipate about another 2.5% in those capital request line items. That's where that delta is.
Yeah, and also well, not just capital, there are some operational increases as well. But also, we have those additional positions, those three, I'm sorry, the licensed clinical worker and the three
Oh, I see.
officers.
Okay. So those have to be counted in there too. And so,
Yes.
okay, I just want to make sure I'm getting it all in there. And then I think you answered my second question. So the LCSW figures are inside of our Holiday and Mill Creek budgets.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
part of that 5.15 for Holiday. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Hey, Debbie, I was looking for what you just showed on the screen, and maybe I just missed it, but could you send that to me again or send it to the board?
The presentation.
Yeah, what you just showed us on the screen.
Yes. Yes.
I was gonna bring that up too, Debbie. Thank you, Jeff, for bringing that up. And also for adding this time the page on the history of increase. That kind of gives us a good round overview. Thank you.
And it looks like the internet has gone down, so the presentation is not able to be shared right now. But yes, we will make sure that we get that the presentation to all of you.
Mr. Chair.
Any?
I can just throw out real quick again, I want to just remind everyone, what we've done here is we're essentially taking all the ingredients, wages, insurance, operations, capital. We've just gone through and essentially sat down and had really building a model, doing an exercise, throwing all those different components into the mixing bowl. What came out was that 7%. And then we look to you to say, where do you want to be at? And then we go there because we can't really get to where you want to be unless we know where we're at. So this is just raw data. We're throwing it all in one big pot, and then we'll start working it from there. But again, like I said earlier, the great thing is we're doing this early in the process in February so that we can do it in a really thoughtful and constructive way and get you good numbers as soon as we can. One of the challenges again is we're doing this really early, so we're having to project some of those absolute final numbers, and we do push our partners and vendors and others, hey, get us what you can as soon as you can. But we only have some control over that, or some limited control over when we get those final numbers. So this is
But
just
Chief, just to be clear, so we would take these back to our councils now, kind of go over it, and then when we need to set that PBIM at the next board meeting.
Yeah,
So-
by policy, the PBIM has to be set at the March board meeting. We're trying to get you data as early as we can so you can go back to your governing bodies, you can talk to them, get a feel for what you want, talk to each other's board members, and then come back to us and say, this is where we want to be, and that's where we're going to go.
Yeah, and I think for the benefit of maybe board members who haven't been involved, that PBIM is set so that it prevents getting into May and assuming we have a certain budget and then coming back in May and it's not, it's different. So once we set that PBIM, say it's 7%, which is what the number we're looking at right now, like say the board votes that it's 7%. If we vote on a budget that's going to be higher than that, it would take a, what is it, 60% weighted vote or something to go above that PBIM percentage.
My apologies, I can look that up. It's a high number and I believe it was a 75%.
I think it's
weighted
75. I
vote.
think you're right. I think the other is the weighted vote. But anyway, so we have to set that in March, and that's the cap that we can't go above unless there's a 75% vote of the members to go above that.
Correct. And we could, you could go above 5%, you could go below. Again, the 5%, we're using that to build a model from. And so, however the board chooses to do that, if they want to stay at the 5, they want to go higher or lower, that is totally under your purview. So, and let us know what you want and we'll get there.
Just doing real quick math here for Midvale's portion, as presented, it'd be about an $800,000 increase to our budget, which would result in nothing else being addressed in Midvale City other than this budget item, about a 25% property tax increase. So that's going to be a difficult one to take back to the council. And so hopefully we can have some discussions and try to get that number down as much as we can without sacrificing any service. That's the difficult balance, as everyone knows.
Mayor, just to hopefully answer your question and concerns, one of the things that this February proposed budget is actually not part of our list of requirements. We're doing this specifically so that this is begin what I would call the interactive process. And so rather than, as Mayor Daly correctly pointed out, waiting till the preliminary budget in May, which is statutorily required, we're actually starting this process in February. So when we get the PBIM in March, we have already worked on the budget and gone through priorities, and there will be committee meetings to discuss these issues. And so it's, I think the hard thing, particularly for Debbie, is some of the numbers we're trying to quote aren't final numbers. For example, VEC is not a final number. Our health insurance isn't going to give us a hard number literally until the day before the March meeting. So by trying to jumpstart this process, we are also, it involves the board in more interaction rather than administration just saying, well, here's a budget. That's why we have these committees to make recommendations and go through more details. And so we want you to know that that by starting this early, we don't have some of the hard numbers that we'll have in May, but it also gives us an opportunity to deal with your concerns in terms of the overall increase and ours in terms of knowing that if there are cuts off of this, we're going to be making some choices. And ultimately, that's why the process has been set up this way, so that starting earlier, more interaction, and coming up with a number that the board can agree with within the knowing where the give and take is in the budget.
Thank you. We certainly do appreciate, having at least these temporary numbers so that we can, I know our finance guru is in the back here, and I know the numbers are making her nervous. We appreciate the working in advance.
Are there any other questions about the proposed budget? We'll move on to the next item, which is approval of the January 16th, 2025 minutes.
Motion to approve?
Second, Jeff Solsgreen.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. The motion carries. Item number 11 is upcoming UPD meetings. On March 10th in Mill Creek City Hall up on the 6th floor, there'll be a swearing-in ceremony. That's at 11 a.m., all invited. March 12th, UPD Finance Committee meeting will take place here at 9 a.m. And on March 20th is our next UPD board meeting at 9 a.m. That's all of our upcoming meetings. Next item, do we need a closed session today?
Yes, there are two matters will be discussed in closed session. One matter is involving the lease, sale, or purchase of real property, and the second matter is involving a matter that must be handled requiring attorney-client confidential communications and possibly dealing with potential or threatened litigation.
Could I, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Jeff Silverstream, I will make a motion that the board go into closed session pursuant to Utah Code 52-4-204 and 205 to discuss pending or threatening litigation as well as the potential acquisition of real property.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
It's unanimous. Yes, we'll do a roll call vote on that. Harmony, do you want to